an oral history interview with John C. Campbell of 2016 West Kinsel Highway in Charlotte, Michigan, 48813. John's phone number is area code 517-543-4284. The recording was made on April 23, 1992 at the Oldsmobile History Center at 4000 North Grand River in Lansing by Jim Walkinshaw. This is tape number 1 of 2 tapes. Well, John, if you would just start perhaps with your name and your address and your phone number for us, please.
John Campbell. I live in Charlotte, 2016 West Kinsel.
Okay. Got a zip code over there?
48813.
Okay.
And telephone number is 517-543-4284.
Great. And if you would just, John, take us back to when you started and where you started and what was going on.
Well, I started with General Motors as a General Motors Institute student in October of 1956.
All right.
I remember a day of testing and qualification prior to that, sometime in early 1956.
All right.
Where that's where I met Norm Campbell. We're still good friends.
Who is unrelated?
Yeah, no relation.
Right.
And we were all hired by Matt Campbell,
Okay.
who was no relation.
Also no relation. Okay.
But I also remember that they took 10 of 120 applicants that year.
Wow.
And then our first, at that time, our work and school periods were 1 month each.
Okay.
So we went to school for the month of October, and then we were back in Lansing for orientation in really the first part of November of 1956.
So you started off with the schooling side of
Yeah, schooling was first for us. So we were called
A.
A section. Yeah.
Okay.
Let's see. I remember that first week was spent trying to get an overview of the whole organization in Lansing.
This is after you came back to the plant?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Floyd Wright, I think, was the fellow working for Matt Campbell at the time that he sort of led us around, and I remember several meetings. In fact, maybe our main room, I guess, was in Building 40 in the big conference room.
Oh, yeah, okay.
At least there were several meetings in there. And department heads, plant protection, sales, engineering. A lot of people talked to us and told us what their group did.
Was that the first time you'd ever been in an industrial plant?
Well, it was really was. I had been to Oldsmobile maybe a year or so prior to that in a schooling session for the hydromatic transmission, the new Jetaway.
Yeah.
I worked in an alley garage in high school, and we came over and took a 1-week class.
Okay. But that wasn't really out in the shop?
No, I was just in Building 64.
Yeah. Okay.
So yeah, there was, and of course our orientation included tours of plants 2 and 3. And
how did that impress you as a?
Well, it was certainly very impressive, because in plant 2 we still had the old hammers, the board hammers and steam hammers, and let's see, that was just prior to putting in the 4,000-ton crank hammer.
Right.
So that was quite a place with all the fire and steam belching out of these noisy machines.
So that must have been the thing that held your interest the most at that time, huh?
Yeah, I think so. I didn't know for sure I wanted to work there, but
So just kind of a neat place.
yeah. And let's see. But I really can't remember the first month. I guess after the first week, I think I worked a little bit in the safety stores.
Mm-hmm.
And then back to school, and each month that we were back at work, we got various assignments. I can remember, like I said, the safety stores. I worked in plant layout in maybe the following year,
Mm-hmm.
but we had actual online hourly rate jobs, such as inspection. I remember working in Plant 3 on knuckle and
Mm-hmm.
steering arm inspection. I worked crankshaft, actually loading castings into the centering machine
Okay.
for 1 month.
That would have been good on the muscles.
Yeah, yeah. And of course we were hourly
Mm-hmm.
in those years.
Do you remember what your starting wage was?
Not exactly. It was 190 something. I can remember just shortly, probably the beginning of 1990 or 1957, going to $2.01 or something.
Oh yeah, okay.
And I thought that was fabulous to be over $2 an hour.
Yeah.
Let's see. Then we spent the first 2 years really in kind of a roaming around process.
Okay.
And sometime in my second year, I began to feel an special interest in the service end of the business.
Mm-hmm.
And I spent 2 or 3 work sessions in Building 68, working for Art Cap
Oh, okay.
in the what was known as the company car garage.
Mm-hmm.
And that was, I found that very interesting, and of course it was a continuation of what I'd done all through high school.
Mm-hmm.
And I after 2 years we had to select our educational option, and I picked sales and service, which was an industrial engineering.
Okay.
Um,
What kinds of things were you doing in the garage? John?
Well, we actually, if there was special problems that dealers couldn't cope with, we got involved with that. Especially local, like Story and
Yeah.
University. If they got a problem car, we would get into it a little bit and help them out.
Mm-hmm.
Company cars that had problems, we worked on those, and feedback to engineering was important, trying
Right.
to
Uh-huh.
debug.
Do you remember any of
future.
the problems of the day, so to speak?
Well, certainly 57 was the big year for the camshaft, soft camshaft lobes, and
Okay.
pretty soon the lifters and camshaft would kind of eat each other up,
Yeah.
and
Port heat treat or something.
yeah.
Were you there when Air Ride was there too?
Yeah, we worked on air ride a lot.
Okay.
We also did time study. I can remember each year, of course, we had to have a manual that said that well, if you get this problem in the dealership, you get this much pay for 4/10 of an hour, or half an hour, or whatever it might be to make this fix.
Was that the thing
And
that
we
was-
had to establish those times.
That was kind of the flat rate, for the flat rate book?
Yeah. And I can remember one of the first things that I worked on was a problem in the steering system that we used to have what we called overcenter. If you can remember that, but when you got into where you normally drove, that is the straight ahead position, you would there was a little tighter fit so that there was no play there.
Okay.
It was called overcenter,
Uh-huh.
and for maybe a quarter of a turn of the wheel, they were supposed to have this binding condition, almost. And that was continually giving problems. It would wear away, or it would be so tight that it would, and so you had to constantly adjust that.
Oh, okay.
And you did it by moving the one gear into the other tighter, and the procedure for doing it was to disconnect the steering, and then you used a spring scale on the steering wheel.
Oh, my God.
And there was like a 3.5 or 4 hour allowance because of the disassembly of the steering. And
I took the fitment arms off?
Yeah.
Oh, my God.
And I'd done it so many times in this alley garage where I worked. I'd made a tool to remove the steering arm from the power steering gear.
Yeah.
And they didn't have that at Olds yet.
Oh, neat.
And so, I guess one of the first things I can remember accomplishing at the garage was I made up one of those tools, and it cut the flat rate from whatever it was, 4-point-something hours to 2.5.
Oh, my Lord, isn't that something?
And,
What was the tool, John? How did
it was just a splitter that
like a fork?
yeah, that simply got the steering arm off of the spline steering gear.
Yeah.
And I mean, that was a taper
like they
press
use
fit
on
thing.
Ball joints, sort
Yeah,
of.
yeah. And
How about that? That's neat.
I can remember Art was quite impressed with that.
Yeah. For a young guy that had come from, quote, no place, so to speak.
Yeah. But of course, in the alley garages, you get pretty ingenious, So the service department, the actual on-car work continued basically until I graduated the 4 years.
All right. So you spent that last 2 years working in the garage, basically.
Yeah, the last 2 years we didn't move around. We had picked a spot and we stayed there.
All right.
And yeah, I worked in the garage, I think, continually then for the...
And Art Camp was there all that time?
Yep.
You were there?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
A lot of interesting experiences there. It was a fun place to work. In fact, I think you remember at my retirement, I was telling about some of the antics we went through, and
But you see, nobody here will know those.
yeah, probably just as well some of them. But,
Okay.
we had, I can remember, we had a janitor named George Moas.
Okay.
George was, he didn't originate in the United States. I'm not sure where he did start life, but he was quite a worker. And he would come by, and part of his job, of course, was sweep the floor. And he did that religiously almost every day.
Okay.
And part of my routine, when he would start sweeping north, I would follow him sweeping south.
Oh.
And on the same line, of course.
Right.
He'd go back and forth a couple of times, and then he'd get mad and chase me and swing the broom. Art would have to come and rescue me.
And you did that on purpose?
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Okay.
It was always a big fun and games.
Could he speak English?
Yes, somewhat.
Yeah.
Especially cursing.
Oh, he was very good at that, huh?
Well, so after 4 years, then I of course went on to complete my requirements for a degree, which meant at that time a 5th-year program.
Okay.
And
What was yours on?
I was trying to remember the title. It pertained to car noises, using noises to diagnose a problem.
Okay.
I don't remember the exact title, but I was supposed to gather on a recording noises that a car made
Okay.
and we'd be able to publish those noises sort of like you publish a manual or
Oh,
something,
okay.
and the world could listen to that, and if it sounded like what they were hearing, they'd know what the problem was.
Right.
Well, this was 1960, and
Mhm.
the recording equipment, I wasn't given a soundproof room and the equipment I kind of had to come up with myself,
Okay.
and so there's a lot of variation between what I could get on a recording and what somebody might hear in a dealership.
Yeah. I suppose the equipment also, because of that vintage, wasn't as sensitive and all the things that exist today.
Yeah, and I guess I'm not sure that the year's effort was of much value to Oldsmobile.
Yeah. Was it used at all afterwards?
Not to my knowledge,
Not to
no.
your knowledge, okay. Well, I think some were that way.
Yeah.
They proved you couldn't do that as well as could.
Yeah, that was kind of about all I accomplished, I think, was to show that you could not ship out tapes or
Yeah.
records to
Yeah.
dealerships and say, if it sounds like this, here's the problem.
Okay.
And I also was not given even current cars to do it on.
Oh, really? Oh.
And
Who was your advisor at that time? Was that Art?
no, it was at the time then when I was in the service department, I had been transferred to a salaried position, and I was working for a man by the name of John Reinhardt,
Oh, okay.
and that was his idea. And I did pass and get my degree,
Well, that's
so
what counted.
that was my goal, I guess.
Yeah.
But I worked from graduation in 1960 through 1964 in the service department,
Okay.
and my jobs included we wrote special bulletins on maintenance problems that cropped up and became sort of an epidemic. We
Fixes, kind of like how you take care of fixing in the field.
we described the problem and what to do to fix it. And I also worked on warranty claims, like if a dealer had a leaky gas tank, he would fill out a warranty claim. It would come
Okay.
into our group of maybe 12 or 14 people.
Mhm.
We would code the problem so that there could be a record kept of it. The leaky gas tank was 127-040-42.
Wow, big number.
Yeah.
Wow.
And this went on. I worked in there for maybe a year and a half.
Mhm.
Yeah, 2 years at the most, I'd say. And, then and I also worked on service manuals. I think starting about 1962, 63, 64. Worked on.
By work on, you mean the
I would-
pages and the...
Well, yeah, I would take a section. I usually did like steering and suspension and brakes maybe,
Okay.
and we would start with where we were at. We would go see the product engineer. What are you going to do for next year? And
Mhm.
and so we had a up-to-date manual for the dealer organization.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
That always came out with the model?
With the model, yeah. It was timed to be introduced in the fall with the,
Okay.
yeah. And
Yeah,
that
how-
was interesting.
How
But
many people did it take them to do a service manual?
we had 3 of us worked on the service manual. And that was adequate. The changes usually were such that sometimes you get 4 or 5 sections. Other times
Yeah.
you might only have 1 if it was all new.
You basically worked on just the chassis manual. You didn't work on the
That's
body
right.
side.
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah, we didn't have anything to do with the body.
All right.
But I also, sometime in that time frame, realized that the opportunity for advancement involved going out into the field, as we called it, the organizations that dealt directly with dealers in various districts throughout the country. Somehow the beginnings of a family that didn't seem compatible anymore, and I opted to transfer to Building 40 Methods and Layout.
Okay.
In
you
the
you
winter.
asked for that to happen, didn't you?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I talked to my boss, and
Was that Riney?
and his boss, and they were very helpful, and they knew that Bob Mooney and George Redburn were looking for somebody.
Sure.
So pretty soon I was talking to them, and you, I guess.
Somewhere in there. I don't know where.
And I think it was December of 1964 that I transferred into Methods and Layout. I remember that when I started, I worked for Dick Niles, and I was assigned to Jim Zamalin.
Oh, yeah.
He sort of taught me the ropes of the plant layout function.
What area did you have? Were you in?
Well, yeah, we had engine parts plant.
All right.
And as I recall, Jim maybe transferred eventually to Plant 2 or something, and then I took over as the layout engineer for the engine parts plant.
And do you remember what the parts plant was doing in those days?
Well, the big thing we were doing, this was prior to much in the way of Building 23. You remember, I think you and Frank maybe worked on just the little portion that had the dock in it.
And a little on leg.
Yeah. And that was the status at the time. And I think the first thing I worked on of any magnitude was the cylinder block scheduling system that we put in the north end of Building 33.
Oh, yeah.
This was a Jim Leonard
The
Methods counterpart. And the objective was to bring blocks from the two block floors, that is Building 28 and Building 38.
Good memory.
And we took them to this central area to get them in order for the assembly line. And this facility consisted of delivery conveyors, and then sorting lanes, and then finally a scheduled conveyor to the assembly line.
All right.
That was the end of, well, someplace the last half of 1965.
All right.
In that time frame.
Okay.
In 1966, the big program was the addition to Building 23 and the Building 23 block line. And I worked on that with the production engineering folks down in Leonard Sears Group.
Okay.
I can remember traveling to some plant in Detroit with Dave Lee, and we were looking at downdraft ventilation.
Okay. A new thing.
A new thing for Oldsmobile. And it existed in this competitor's plant, as I recall, and we went and looked at it and decided, yeah, we can do that. And I think we did it a lot better than they did it, but anyway, that was the first downdraft ventilation system, and now that's kind of commonplace, especially for cast iron machining.
Prior to that time, it was all just big old ducts.
Yeah, and you know, the heavies tended to fall out anyway, so you might as well take them down because they want to go that way anyway. So that 1966 and into 1967 was consumed with the design of this building. which, as you recall, had all different bay spacings, starting with
Right.
like 23, 24 feet in the north end and ending at 30 feet in the south end.
That was to try and match adjacent building
Yeah.
28.
Yeah. And
How far did that go out to the east? Do you remember, John? Was that
we added 4 bays at
at that time?
yeah.
Okay.
120,000 square feet, maybe.
That's pretty bad. That sounds about right.
So after the block line was in and running, maybe fall of '67. That was about the time that the assembly folks decided that final car paint repair, that we needed to expand, I guess, the assembly area, and to do that we had to move out paint repair out of building 32 and 75.
Okay.
So I became part of that group. I remember Ray Orr working on building 150 primarily, and my function was to plan and time the removal of paint repair from building 3275 and follow the expansion of the assembly line, so we'd have more line length actually for car assembly.
Yeah.
And that took place in '67 through mid '68.
Was that an ongoing thing, John? Right while we were making cars?
Yeah, we had to do it without interfering with too much with car build,
Yeah.
and it certainly created a lot of problems for the assembly folks,
Must have been
production folks.
A
But
bit tricky.
yeah, there were some tentative things done to allow permanent things to be done later, and you know, and I can remember a couple interesting things there. We replaced. We used to have what we called building or conveyor number 25 and conveyor 41 transfers. They were side shuttles.
Okay. I remember those.
And they were great opportunity to get hurt, and also a continuous maintenance problem.
Okay.
And it was decided that we would replace them with loop conveyors that simply pulled the car around in a 50 or 75 foot radius, whatever the dimensions
Like
were.
a circle, or half a circle.
Semicircle, yeah.
Okay.
So that was part of the rearrangement. To accomplish one of those, we had to remove a support column that held up part of building 32 to make a bigger space to get the car through. And I can remember plant engineering considering that an impossibility, and they wanted a new layout.
Okay.
And one day I noticed that the one support column that I wanted to take out had about a half-inch clearance to the floor.
You mean it wasn't even sitting on the ground?
No.
Oh my goodness.
So I went down there and I took the bolts out, and I brought the plant engineer down, who was Bob Dittmer.
Yeah.
And I said, "This is the column that's crucial, Bob." Yep. And I gave it a kick, and
It slapped in the breeze.
yeah. He says, "Maybe we can do that."
That convinced him.
And, I can remember laughing about that for several days. Another interesting thing was there used to be a paint mix room sort of in the southeast corner of building 32A, right down along
by
the
railroad
track.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
And that needed to come out because we wanted to put in a mechanical repair conveyor in that what had been the rail dock bay.
Okay.
And this paint repair, of course, the paint mix room was related to the paint repair, which was moving out anyway.
Yeah.
So we decided we'd take that out of there. And we got this contracted, and people came in and started working on it. And lo and behold, one day the whole thing just fell down.
The building?
The roof.
The little shed?
Yeah, the roof fell down. I remember Bob Rollis was out there, and I walked out there to see what had happened. And he said, "Well, we're lucky nobody was hurt." And it turned out that the trusses or roof trusses or rafters had never been bolted in place when the building was built
Oh, my Lord.
30 or 40.
Okay.
The building had just been kind of standing, held together by the paint and the sheet metal for.
Isn't that something?
And of course, we didn't know it until they started taking down they took off the sheet metal, and then the wall just sprung out and the rafters dropped.
Isn't that interesting?
And nobody got hurt.
Yeah.
But so.
How did John, the big loop conveyors that you put in, how'd they work?
Well, okay, I guess they're still there.
Yeah. Was that a unique thing to get started so it would work? Because you got two different links there going around.
Well, I remember, of course, that we had different speeds on the inside and the outside loops, but no, I don't remember.
Wasn't that particularly difficult? It cranked up?
No, yeah, it took off and ran. Of course, we cleated one side only, and to drive the car, and we did have some initial problems with people leaving them in park, and
and then they would roll up over.
But that worked fine. See, after the paint repair was moved out and the assembly was back in business, then I think the next thing I did, I believe it was, I had a job on the engine delivery conveyor that brought engines from, and I can't remember exactly what we did there, but we rearranged part of that area in 3275 where engine dress was.
All right.
Let's see. Someplace in there we early 70s, I think, is when we did the Sentinel building for.
Yeah, 150.
Yeah.
Somewhere in the 70s. Yeah.
It's like 72 or 3. That was another attempt to get better product to the dealers, and it was a last look-see, even after paint repair, and that involved building addition, as well as some conveyor changes, and actually most of it was just stalls for. It was a QC 10% maybe, or 5 or 6% look-see at the cars. That was about a year project in there.
Do you remember what precipitated that? How it got started?
Well, no, not too much. I do remember that the reliability people at the time seemed to be under strict discipline to get better cars to the dealerships. And we were sending things to the dealers that should never have left the plant.
Okay, so it was a kind of a step to improve quality, so to speak.
Yeah. And let's see, that was. I was trying to think. I'm missing my timing a little bit, but. Someplace in there in this like 73, 74 time frame, I think I went back and worked in the engine plant to add building 22 and move we moved cylinder heads from building 36
Yeah.
and
38.
maybe the exhaust, or no, the intake manifolds.
Yeah, they were there too.
More building there at building east of building 23,
Okay.
and relocation of existing floors, which allowed for expansion of other things back in that area.
So that was the first, let's see, building 22 then would have gone out, what, a couple of bays at that time? Or did it go all the way?
No, we, that was added in two pieces. I can't remember whether it was 2 or 3 bays,
Mm-hmm.
but it was about half of what's there now.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Also, sometime in the 73, 74 time frame, I was working with Larry Kerr's group on a new car assembly facility.
Right.
We had I think so I got to skip back now because it was 1968, wasn't it, that we did building 90 initially.
The first little square.
First little square is we did it under the pretext of a warehouse.
Right.
Replacement for Duotherm. I think the fun part of that job was trying to determine the proper elevation.
Okay.
I can remember working on that extensively with Jim Logan to get it at the right elevation that we would eventually want.
Uh-huh. So that when you extended it west?
Yeah. and as you know, we ended up with it considerably stuck in the ground.
Yeah.
But the second floor had to somewhat match existing buildings to the south.
Yeah.
Because of the connecting trestles. The trestle undertaking was at that time was
I mean, that was a
considerable.
big thing.
Yeah, and the what we called driverless trains then, which are now AGVs, was a connecting conveyor really from the warehouse buildings to the various spots throughout small parts, engine dress, and car assembly.
Well, that particular rig was a pretty successful thing, was it not?
That worked for a lot of years, and we had some innovation there with the calling for elevators, the 45-foot elevators that would allow 2 trains side by side to enter and then be moved from floor to floor.
And the train really did it all by itself?
Yes, the train called the elevator and said, "I'm ready now, take me up or down." And yeah, we had one of those in building 90 and another in let's see, it would have been 26, yeah. So, okay, so after the warehouse building.
Now, excuse me for interrupting, John. Did the little electric train, that came in with the first warehouse?
Yeah, its function primarily was building 90 was to become the receiving center for purchased parts.
Okay.
For all of assembly. Now that certainly some of the like Allied and stuff we didn't run through there, but most purchase parts did.
It ended up being that way?
Yes, it went about as planned.
Okay.
And that stayed in place until like 1979, I think. It was about a 10-year program there. The train stayed even after, to some extent, they were reduced in scope, but they stayed even later than that.
And John, you worked on the train, didn't you?
Yeah, my job primarily was the train system.
How did you pick the electric train versus something else?
Well, I guess we were looking for versatility. we knew we could go wherever we wanted to go simply by burying a wire in the floor.
Okay.
And the cost of a traditional overhead conveyor system would have been many times what the
All right.
train system cost. Also, the material we were dealing with was for the most part palletized material, which lent itself to trailers and that type of conveyance.
Yeah.
So.
Were there any unique problems that you remember with the thing as you got it in? And
Well, yeah, there was a lot of problems. One of the early fears was that it would become attracted to railroad tracks or whatever, and
Okay.
follow those rather than the
wire?
guided track.
Uh-huh.
We tried to eliminate metal, extraneous metal that would attract it by replacing that with grouting or something, you know. But we still had some of those problems where it would just leave the path on occasion and follow a beam buried,
Okay.
or
The reinforcing rod in the floor.
yeah, very steel. Yeah.
What about the business of running into people?
Well, we had.
Or
I'm not
things.
sure that was a first, but the tractors each incorporated a sonar system that sent out little sound waves, and if they bounced off a person or thing
An
in
object.
within a close enough proximity, it stopped the vehicle.
Oh, okay.
And then when that problem went away, if it was a person or a fork truck moving through the area, the train would restart.
Okay.
That was quite sensitive, required constant attention, I would say.
Okay.
We had a repair area set up, you know, for people maintain the tractors.
Keep it going. Okay.
Yeah. But that seemed to work all right, and then it was one of the few systems that performed that function and did it well for a number of years.
How
Let's
did
see.
you handle going outdoors with the thing in the mush and the slush?
Well, yeah, if we got big snows, that was big problems. And,
Okay.
it required
Somebody.
maintenance people had to get the path shoveled off,
Okay.
because we did traverse outdoors between building 19 and 75. But it gradually became accepted. And,
Was the initial? How did people feel about it initially out in the shop? Remember any discussion?
well, it was mostly negative.
Was it?
Even those of us, I think, in engineering had our doubts.
Okay.
But the cost of another type of mechanical conveyance system was so great that we figured the worst thing that would happen, we'd have to provide some manpower, and
Okay.
it was considered to be the only economically feasible option.
Yeah.
And it turned out that we didn't have the excessive manpower that we feared. But there were, like I say, a couple of maintenance people and some other expediters involved.
Okay. Oh, that's good.
Let's see. Sometime in the must have been mid-70s. We had a area called front-end sheet metal assembly
Okay.
in the south end of buildings 16C and 17. And somebody in methods came up with a scheme that would combine the what had been 3 or 4 separate subassembly areas into one subassembly area, and supposedly generate a 47-person reduction. So that involved a lot of conveyor work and different feeds to the assembly line, and I don't remember that there was any building changes of any consequence, but certainly a big conveyor job.
Okay. Did you then put all those things together on one?
Yeah, we put the front end sheet metal. Let's see, we had the core support. We had 2 fenders and a hood.
Okay.
And that had constituted 3 separate sub-assembly areas, and we combined that into one.
Okay.
And that was I think in the fall of '75 that went into effect. So that was quite an interesting project, and that worked out even better than anticipated.
Oh, really? They made those savings that they had
They made 2 or 3 more. I think they actually reduced 50 head count.
I'll be darned.
So it was quite impressive in terms of input versus savings, like a 6-month payback or something.
Yeah. See, at this time, John, we were making all the cars out in the 3275 area.
Well, the Tornado still ran, which went in '66, still ran down through 20 and 16A and B.
Okay.
But we built both the Cutlass and the 88s and 98s.
All right, on the big.
Yeah,
car.
yeah.
Okay.
And this system had to incorporate the Cutlass in.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we're in '75.
Yeah.
Someplace after that, I guess, maybe '76, '77, we started planning the car assembly facility. That was maybe one of the early team concept where there was 5 or 6 of us from different disciplines that worked for Larry Kerr, and we schemed up what we would want the new car assembly plant to look like.
Okay.
Sometime during that project, there was apparently it was a financial crunch in the late '70s. I remember it got delayed a little bit.
Yeah, we shut it off.
Yeah. And I transferred out and went to work in packaging for a year or 2. That was in like end of '76 through end of '79, I think.
It was kind of during the slump.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
The planning on the assembly building kind of went in limbo, and while I was down in packaging, we began to hear talk of a new V6 diesel assembly building, or V6 diesel engine machining and assembly. And I did some maneuvering and got to work on that.
Okay.
And other people started on the car assembly building again. I wasn't part of that as it finally developed, but I did get involved with the V6 diesel, which involved finding a site, building a building, getting equipment, and making layouts of
what do you
complete engine
remember
plant.
about the? Just a minute.
We were in beginning of the
diesel
V6
plant.
diesel plant.
Yeah. Okay.
You were starting to ask.
I was going to ask you about if you remembered anything about what you were doing in the packaging department, where you were there.
Well, the 3 years I spent there, I did a couple of things I can remember. One was at that time we were very conscious of different business groups, but we didn't call it that at the time.
Okay.
And we did a thing called rebill. Like if we bought packaging that benefited GMAD,
All right.
we would determine that this many dollars was spent because we had to ship to GMAD, and we would tell them that, and they would pay us back.
Oh, okay.
And
Have you never done that before?
no,
Oh,
no.
okay.
I started doing that, and it was kind of guessed at that maybe it would be like $100,000 a year thing. I think the second or third year I did it, we rebuilt like $1.3 million or something.
Ooh, turns into a fairly significant thing.
Yeah, I'm not sure that taking money from one pocket to another was really very conducive to overall business sense, but anyway, that was the thing that we did. And another thing I worked on was the engine racks that are currently being used now with the Quad 4 engine, but they were initially tooled to accept the V6 diesel. As a part of that, I also worked on bumper and gas tank packaging.
All right.
Which was
were those annual rituals that you went through?
Yes. Whenever there was a change in the product, we had to design a pack to accommodate it because we were assembling and lancing maybe half the cars, and half were at well, Arlington did some, Tarryton. We had I guess 4 or 5 assembly plants, didn't we? But we also supplied gas tanks to most of GM.
Okay. So that was a big task.
Yes, and they were shipped all over the country. But with the beginnings of the V6 diesel and the new building, plant layout again became more exciting. And
do you remember anything about the, well, I call it the start of all that? How we kind of got going?
Well, of course, at the time, in the late 70s, there was quite a gasoline fear.
Yeah.
The availability of gasoline in 74, 75 time frame triggered the V8 diesel, which was simply a top end of a gas engine changed to accept diesel fuel, and maybe didn't prove to be as reliable as we would have liked. But the V6 diesel was a designed engine for diesel, and a lot of very positive feelings about that engine. And we decided to go ahead and build a plant to produce it. Of course, during the time frame that we were building the plant and putting in the equipment, diesel fuel went from half the price of gasoline to at least equivalent, if not more. And the reliability of the V8 diesel maybe negated a lot of V6 diesel sales. So that venture never proved to be as lucrative as we'd hoped. But we did build a nice building and had a nice facility and a good team of workers. And I think that allowed us to win the next corporate engine, that is the Quad 4. And
John, do you remember how was the planning for that different than previous things?
The V6?
Yeah, the V6, the new building and all that stuff?
Well, again, maybe more of a team concept early on. That is, the plant manager was selected early, before there was a plant. And he had a team of people, again from several disciplines, production folks, inspection, and as well as the engineering people, and it was kind of done as a team effort.
All right.
So that there was a lot of buy-in right from the beginning.
Were they physically working right with you, so to speak?
Yes, we had we had everybody in place early on,
Mhm.
and there was certainly weekly, if not more frequently, meetings in the war room to iron out any differences of opinion.
How, in contrast to what had been done previously, how was that done before that?
Well, I think, as I recall, my first projects, the coordination of the different disciplines was kind of left to the plant layout engineer.
Okay.
We had a thing called a sign-off card or something like that, where we supposedly had reviewed these layouts with various departments.
Okay.
But it took a considerable effort by the plant layout engineer to see that everybody actually was in agreement.
Okay.
And there were meetings of all the disciplines, on what we called the model board,
Okay.
which was a scale model of the buildings. I think the later team efforts proved to be more desirable because there was less surprises when the actual facilities were put in place. And
Did it go smoother because of the joint effort or not?
You could say it went smoother in that when problems jumped up at you, everybody tried to work together to solve them rather than point fingers of blame.
Okay.
So yeah, that was a definite improvement.
Mhm.
Not sure that it.
Did it go any faster, so to speak?
I don't think it went any faster.
All right. So it didn't
In
help
fact,
that side of it.
No. I think the key was the more extensive buy-in and the willingness to work to correct the problems.
Good communication too.
Yeah. Okay, so we've got the building up, and sales are sliding, and as we get into the mid '80s, not much demand for diesels.
Okay.
And there wasn't much work for plant layout engineers.
Okay. Now you were still out there at that
Yep.
time. All right.
Sometime in the early '80s, there was a project at Plant 1 called NCAR.
Okay.
And that involved a lot of people because it was a complete change in the car assembly facilities at Plant 1. And I can remember hearing one day that somebody was going to job out the layout of the vehicle shipping building. And it seems at that time I ran right over to see you or somebody and got my name on a list and became the layout engineer for the final vehicle shipping facility.
Okay, this is the new one that's between the two bridges?
Yeah, 140.
Whatever it was.
150. No, 160. 160.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
I can remember people saying, "How do buildings get numbers?" And I
Right.
said, "Lowly people sit and pick one and start using it."
Right.
And so anyway, I worked on that during, I think, an '83, '84 time frame.
Okay.
And that was a very interesting project because we had to get a lot of stuff into a small, tight area around railroad tracks. It involved a complete new paint repair conveyor system, a new building, and its function was to expedite the loading of rail cars. The previous facility allowed us access to 12 rail cars for tri-level cars for loading cars. This one gave us access to 47 or 48 cars.
A whole bunch.
And we did it by, of course, expanding the track facilities and
Did you throw away the old one, so to speak?
yeah, the old facility had to go and the new one went into place. But the interesting thing about that project was right at the very beginning, we said, well, we got to load 3 levels of rail cars. And we tried and tried to engineer a building that could support cars and yet have enough headroom to get through in the lower levels. And right from the word go, I can remember having the people say, well, now you can load level 3 anytime, but you can't load level 1 and 2 together. You have to you had to drive over the hitch hump,
The coupler, or
the coupler to get in, and then down to get into A deck.
Okay.
And we worked for a month trying to figure out how to build this building so that we could have access to all 3 levels. And all of a sudden one day I can remember sitting there saying, why do we need 3 levels when we can only use 2 at a time?
Yeah.
And from then on the building was a 2-level building with a ramp that
up and down.
went up and down for
yeah.
conveyors for levels A and B.
All right.
And everything got a lot easier from then on.
Okay.
But,
How were these 40-some cars, John? Were they all to different locations, basically?
Yeah, the loading goal was certainly to correspond with the final destination.
History recording of John C. Campbell of 2016 West Kinsel Highway, Charlotte, Michigan, 48813. The recording was made on April 23rd, 1992 at the Oldsmobile History Center at 4000 North Grand River in Lansing by Jim Walkinshaw. This is tape number 2 of 2 tapes.
Yeah, each rail car was designated to. Can't remember the destinations, but I'm going to say there was 30 maybe throughout the United States, and you tried to load accordingly.
But that car that was 4th down the line might go someplace different than the 3rd car.
Oh yes, yeah.
Okay.
Now we ended up with I think there was 12 rows of cars of various
12
lengths.
12 tracks.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, 6 on each side.
Yeah.
And each spot was a destination. In other words, you might have 3 cars going to say to Kansas City, or 5
so
cars.
The
whole string was assigned to one destination.
All right.
Yes.
Okay. So you really didn't have intermixed destinations.
No.
Okay.
And then you would try to schedule your build a little bit to match the shipping needs.
Okay.
That, of course, never worked as great as it could in engineering, but there was a strong effort to do that, to minimize the offline handling. That was the big goal, was to stop driving cars all around.
Okay. And then you didn't have to store a whole bunch of them somewhere.
Right. Yeah, and we did accomplish most of that.
All right. Did the computer kind of do all that for you? Is that what was doing that job, or how was that handled?
Well, yeah, I wasn't involved too much with the scheduling system, but I know it had to do with what orders were open. They selected what they were going to build based on what they really needed to ship.
Yeah, okay.
And there was a strong effort to
so they meshed all those things
to mesh the shipping needs with the build needs, and that all fed back clear to Fisher Body, and
so it really was kind of a complex scheduling system.
Yes, yeah.
Who worked on that?
Well, let's see, remember Bob Watson was involved,
Okay.
yeah, and there's quite a few people. Of course, Glenn Trofe was the
okay, out in the
traffic
yard.
guy. Yeah.
Okay, well that's kind of neat.
Let's see. Then after that was up and running, then I had to get back to work at Plant 5 because of the.
So what had you come over?
I really stayed right at Plant 5 and just
Worked on that.
worked on
program.
that kind of unsupervised and
Okay.
happy-go-lucky. And then back at Plant 5, the Quad 4 project had begun really in the
Okay.
fall of '84, and it was I was going to be involved with engine assembly.
Okay.
And
Now, had the diesel plant been shut down at that
the
point?
diesel plant shut down March of '85, so we were still spitting out a few engines,
All
but
right.
basically
Just not very.
sales were over and done with.
Yeah.
So initially we started out trying to figure out how to put in Quad 4 engine assembly as well as have the V6 diesel assembly, but but not very far into our planning it became evident that we could just quit building V6 diesels.
Okay.
And let's see, then also sometime in there, the methods people decided that we would buy this engine assembly line from a company in Italy called Campbell.
All right.
And that turned out to be a good choice because it gave a lot of us a chance to travel.
True.
And I can remember some very interesting trips to Germany and Austria, looking at different car assembly or engine assembly plants, really.
Was that kind of the first time that we had gone, so to speak, abroad that you're aware of for that kind of
Yeah,
stuff?
I don't remember buying an extensive piece of equipment from overseas. I'm sure we had some individual
Yeah.
mills or lathes or something,
Yeah.
but this was a complete engine assembly line. And not only did we have the normal engineering problems to contend with, but we had a language barrier as well. And it proved to be very interesting.
So did everybody learn Italian?
We did have Italian classes,
Okay.
but most of us learned our Italian when we were over there just out of necessity.
Okay.
Unfortunately, one of the Campbell people became quite versed in English, and we did most of our communication in English,
Okay.
except when I had to order at the restaurant. And that project went from the fall of '84. I became involved in early '85 through it when it started producing engines in 1987.
All right.
And that was kind of quite a concentrated effort for almost 3 years
Yeah.
there to get that. Of course, the building was in place, but we had to remove the existing equipment.
The old V6 stuff was not usable?
No, we the only thing of that was reused was the block line.
Oh.
I believe.
Okay.
I think
So
it
there
was
was a
retooled.
little bit of the machinery
Yeah.
that was kept.
It was retooled, but everything other than that was
Like the
moved
engine
out.
assembly was all
Engine assembly was
through
blitzed.
different,
Yeah.
just threw away the
Yeah.
old one.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
5 years old and
Yeah, didn't make hardly an engine.
50,000 or something.
Yeah, that's a shame, isn't
Yeah, it was. That's why the plant's never made any money.
it? Yeah.
But that project then worked through '87, and someplace in that time frame, I think February of '87, I transferred into packaging,
Okay.
where I worked till I retired in September of
But still
'91.
on at Plant 5?
Still at Plant 5. yeah.
Okay.
And
So what was that side of the house doing at that point in time, the packaging gang?
well, when I moved into there, the basic program was in place for extensive returnable program. Most of the packaging, 95% of it was returnables.
Both incoming and outgoing?
Yes, of course, all of the outgoing was engine racks,
Okay.
and that was 100% returnables. The incoming, with the exception of a few small parts, was returnables as well.
Okay.
And that program's still in place.
Was the V6 less
V6
so?
was a little bit less, but it was quite an extensive returnable program. When that started, the direction was no cardboard, and,
Okay.
and
That
we
was
did
one
pretty
of the
good.
plant goals?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And that carried over because we had the same plant manager for the initially for the
Okay.
Quad 4.
Can you remember some of the, what I will call, differences in that original management, or whatever you want to call it, of the diesel plant versus previous plants you had been?
Well, I think it was realized that cardboard dust in a plant environment was a strong negative. That
Okay.
that people running around hauling cardboard was a housekeeping problem as well as a cost.
Okay.
I also think that there was a ecology environment thinking starting to blend through people's
Okay.
engineering thoughts, that we can't go on forever making landfills,
Mm-hmm.
and those factors, I think, led us to the ever-increasing use of returnables.
What about in other areas? Where was the plant philosophy different?
Well, the Plant 5 philosophy right from the beginning involved more teamwork, more involvement by the hourly people. We got away from trying to inspect quality into the product
Okay.
by simply doing it right the first time, and much of the inspection as we knew it in years gone by was deleted from the
Okay.
Plant 5 concepts or plant goals. Let's see. Another factor, I think, simply the housekeeping and general appearance, good lighting. There's a lot of things done in the area of employee morale, or trying to make the employee feel proud of his workplace
Okay.
and happy with his environment, so that it was a nice, well-lit, good air movement building. And we were quite proud of that. I think that we didn't create just a little hole for the employee that he could look around and see other things going on, and that led a lot to the returnables, because we wanted to keep big bulky stock off the line, and the returnables lent themselves to denser packs because of it was designed for.
Sure.
So I think there was quite a modernization that transpired between what I'd worked on in the building 23, 22.
Yeah, like the Plant 1 engine plant.
Yeah, facilities versus.
How did the people that operated, the hourly guys, feel about all that?
Well, like I say, the hourly involvement was greater, and in fact, in the planning stages, we had people that maybe you would call utility people, or in other words, a jack of all trades, a guy that could fill in and do most of the jobs. We had those type of people in place to help us with line processing. In other words, do you put the crank in place before you put the bearings on,
Yeah.
or after,
Yeah.
and the line sequencing. They were a part of that, and so I think again, buy-in, from the onset was
Mhm.
was always better because of that involvement.
Did they offer suggestions along the way on ways to do things, or how?
Oh, more than that, yes, they had a big say in the final development of the facility,
Okay.
and I think almost entirely for the better. Uh, so that was a very interesting project, certainly.
Yeah. Okay.
I got to be involved not only with the layout but also the functioning after the fact of the
Mhm.
packaging.
Mhm.
And, let's see, I guess if I could skip back, I could remember another job I worked on. I can't remember exactly when this was, but must have been in the late 60s when we talked a little bit about a conveyor system from Fisher Body.
Yeah. Okay. Rather than the truck.
Yeah.
Okay.
But we eventually decided, well, we just can't afford that, but we did decide we need to update the trucks.
Oh. Okay.
And previously we'd been to get the cars off the trucks. Now the bodies came from Fisher Body on body jacks,
Right.
and we simply hooked a chain to the body jack and then hooked the chain to a conveyor, and away it went.
Okay. Just dragged them out.
Dragged them off the truck.
Okay.
Somehow we came up with a scheme that we'll put a air-powered conveyor on the trucks, and we won't need to bother with the chains.
Okay.
This will be,
So there's kind of like a drag chain on the truck.
yeah, and it was going to be air-powered from the building, and it would reduce that very dangerous job of
Mhm.
chaining up the jacks to the conveyor. The only problem was, how do you back a truck in and automatically connect to an air hookup?
Okay.
But we finally, I can't remember actually whether we had to develop the funnel connector or whether, I think the main part of the funnel we actually had to develop. The coupler, the quick disconnect coupler existed in the world, but
Yeah.
but we designed a funnel that was maybe 8 or 10 inches in diameter that gave the
Thing had to plug into,
Yeah.
so to speak.
yeah, it gave the trucker a little bit of room for error.
So you didn't have to hit it right dead on.
Yeah,
Mhm.
but that was deemed to be unworkable when we were progressing with it. And I can remember spending a lot of time out there from when it tried to start until it actually was working well enough for me to leave.
Yeah. So it was not an easy task, even.
No,
like
that was quite an extensive field fit
Mhm.
afterwards.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Mhm.
I remember a lot of evenings and nights involved with that.
For some reason, body receiving had to work, didn't it?
Yeah, that was considered crucial to the engine or car assembly. So I guess I've pretty much covered my career. Maybe getting back again into the latter stages there, the packaging at Plant 5, and the extensive use of returnables. I did begin in the last year or two to do more design, and in fact we even have a group in place that involves all of the GM engine division packaging engineers.
Oh, okay.
And a lot of my efforts here in the last 2 or 3 years were along the lines of corporate containers.
Commonality
between different,
right.
For example, right now the corporation is using a tray that I designed that moves all of the engine balancers.
Mhm.
We used to call them harmonic balancers.
Mhm.
They're
The
now
little
called
flywheel
dampeners.
balancer, yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Well, it's not the flywheel end.
But
It's
the other end,
it's
yeah.
the front end of the crankshaft.
Pull it.
Yeah. That tray is common not only for all of General Motors. Unfortunately, it works for our competitors as well.
Oh,
And
that's neat.
yeah,
Yeah.
and they're trying to buy some trays from us,
Oh, okay.
which my replacement is working on now a little bit.
Okay.
I made a piston pin tray that now gives Bay City only one tray to load pins in for all of General Motors.
They don't come in a big old tin box.
Well, they still do in a couple, 3 plants that want them that way, but
Yeah.
and then they dump them, and pretty soon the quality world will put an end to that,
Yeah.
and then the other trays in place, which has a more controlled dump.
Is there a little pocket for everything to sit in, or not?
No, it's they're bulked in about maybe 100 pins per tray, but they're in constant contact, and we do not give up orientation.
Okay, so
I
they
mean,
always stay together. So
Yeah, and they always stay oriented from the way they were built, so there's not corners hitting
Yeah.
radiuses and so forth. Valve tray. Most valves now use the tray that we developed at Plant 5.
Okay.
Um,
Did the other divisions have guys working on similar subjects, or didn't they?
Most of them had packaging engineers. Very few of them, none of them gave any thought to what another city might be using.
Mhm. Okay.
And I think we're seeing more of that now.
All right.
So I guess that was maybe some of my latter
Yeah.
accomplishments, and I'm quite proud of that. That a lot of my ideas moved into other plants.
Yeah.
Oil level switch was
Okay.
that's when you have a supplier that produces parts for, say, 10 different engine plants. It's very difficult for him to get 10 different packages.
I would think so.
And
And to keep things straight.
yeah, and so to be able to package all his product in one package was quite a cost saving.
Mm-hmm.
And,
See, John, you have now also in that time frame, you worked for quote Oldsmobile, and then the powertrain bunch. Have you seen anything there from how has that happened, or how did that work? Has that worked okay? Those changes in organizational changes?
I certainly can't even remember them all, but as you indicated, sometime in the mid-'80s we became, instead of being Oldsmobile, we were powertrain. And then later we became General Motors Engine Division, and then the teamwork throughout Lansing diminished as each of those changes took place, because you never knew who to talk to in the other functions.
So you could see that.
Yeah, I saw most of the changes as negative. And I don't know, sales kind of indicates that.
Yeah, something happened there too.
Yeah. So, but it was quite frustrating in the latter stages for those of us that had known Oldsmobile in its heyday. Of course, really the downturn in sales in negative expansion
Yeah.
was a very discouraging thing to those of us that were used to doing expansion work. And I mean, that really, expansions is what made plant layout interesting. And when they went away, that took a lot of the excitement out of the job.
Yeah.
But of course, that those times was when packaging was a good place to work. So.
Because it always was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I kind of maneuvered around to the best both worlds there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. What do you think, John, out of all that period of time was the most fun time you had?
Well, I don't know. And when I think back over my career, you know, I really only had 2 or 3 bad years.
Okay.
I can remember those, but and then we just had to do something about them.
Yeah.
And but I enjoyed the plant layout functions when we were building a new building and putting in new equipment. And I like that clean sheet approach.
Okay.
And certainly the packaging function here from the 87 through 91 time frame I found very exciting because well, of course, based on overall engine cost of like $1,000 an engine or $950, taking out $5 out of the cost of an engine really is not a big thing, but yet
that's pretty big numbers.
Yet that's what I was able to accomplish
Yeah.
with the packaging changes. And
Anybody can save $5 a car saves a lot of money. So.
well, yeah, but I mean, there was unfortunately still another 200 or 300 to be saved to make it competitive. But
you get all your 100 guys saving $5.
yeah,
Pretty soon you get it.
And so I enjoyed this the last 3 or 4 years probably as much as any of them. The bad times usually were when we had a money crunch. And
what do you think was perhaps the most interesting project you worked on all that?
Well, I'm quite torn between the vehicle shipping building. I found to be extremely exciting because I didn't have I'm not sure whether the word is luxury or the restrictions of supervision.
Okay. Kind of on your own, you mean?
Yes, I don't remember. I think 2 or 3 times I came and talked with you, maybe, or with Frank Fowler a couple of
That
times.
wouldn't have been me, because I wasn't there.
Oh, that's right. You were gone then,
Yeah,
weren't you?
yeah.
But it was hard when I wanted feedback and you know, another set of eyeballs to look at what I was doing. It was hard to find that. And that was kind of good in some ways because I knew that I had to do it or it wasn't going to get done. And by that same token, I was not restricted at all in what I could do.
Yeah.
So that was extremely interesting. But certainly the engine assembly line for the current quad 4 engine,
The Campbell thing.
the Campbell thing was unforgettable experience too. The trips to Italy, I can remember my scheme was to eat supper and go to sleep on the plane, which just infuriated some of the other people who sat there in fear. One morning I woke up over France and there was 3 U.S. bombers flying treetop level. And when we landed, I learned about the attack on Libya.
Oh, the Libyan attack.
And I knew that all the planes did not go around. I can also remember one landing in Rome and being told to not step on the tape that outlined 3 or 4 bodies on the in the Rome airport.
Yeah.
And, so it was a very interesting 2 or 3 years.
Well, that's great, John.
Not being able to read road signs and coming to a 4-foot high snowbank in the middle of the road. Yeah, I'm sure you would.
Okay. Well, you think we've pretty well grounded in the ground, or anything else? Folks?
Yeah, I guess that's about all I can think of. Possibly, if if I get some more ideas, if we can come back and.
Or we've had people do that. And if you want rummaging around at home and find some stuff that you want to quote donate, why?
Yeah, well,
we're glad to accept those kinds of things.
You remember a year or so ago, I brought in a packet.
Right,
we
that's
went
right.
through it, and so I do have a few things, but they're duplicates of what you got.
That's okay too. We are collectors.
Well, but you went through it and determined that you had everything
right
you wanted out of my stuff.
Yeah.
So.
Okay. Well, then I will shut her off, John.
Okay.